Oh boy, it'd almost be better. This is so silly. Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! Hello everybody, this is George the Antique Nomad, and welcome to this month's bonus video. If you are a level 2 member, you will be seeing this and watching these items go live on eBay as we release the video. If you are not a level 2 member, you can click join or look in the link in the bio under memberships and find out more information about that. Each month I try to put aside 20 items that I find interesting for various reasons, things that I think are a little more unusually pretty or unusual or have some characteristic that I think will be fun to talk about, and I list them on eBay. I do this video so that the items go live as the video is released. If you're seeing this after the release of the video, you may still be able to see those items on eBay, or you may be able to look and see completed sales. I do this in part so that my members have an opportunity to buy items now if they like them, or take a chance on bidding, and also so that everybody gets more information, and I'm very grateful for the level 2 members for helping make this possible. Let's begin, because I've got a lot of stuff this time. I actually have 21 items. And the first on the list is a very pretty console set. Look at this interesting peach color. Now this is elegant glass of the Depression era, meaning that it was a little better quality. If you had money in the Depression, this is what you bought. You didn't go to the theater and get your stuff out of the theater or a box of oats. You went and bought nice things. This particular set is a console set, meaning that it has a console bowl and it has a pair of candlesticks. Now, it's a little hard for me to juggle and have all of these in my hand, so I'm going to show you the detail up close. This is by a company called Paden City. Paden City, West Virginia was founded because they wanted to have a place above the Ohio River to put industry on a bluff where it wouldn't get flooded. And the glass industry and the pottery industry were big there. So a pottery company opened in 1914, and by 1916 this glass company opened, and they operated until 1951 and made really beautiful things, and their colors were just a little more intense than their competitors. The pink is a little pinker, it's a little rosier, the green is limey and bright, the yellow colors are very vivid, and so a lot of people really prefer Paden City, especially because they really like to do these exotic bird patterns. These were very popular in the 1920s and 30s. This one is called Nora Bird, and Nora Bird console sets included the console bowl and the 2 candlesticks, which I'll show you. And they would sit next to each other on a console, which is like a sideboard or a buffet. So there's these 2 little mushroom-shaped candlesticks, and they also have the bird etch. Now they did a lot of other, actually this one you can see the bird there. They did a lot of other patterns with birds as well. It was a mainstay for theirs. Their glass tended to be just a little fancier than the competition as well. So they're really pretty pieces. This set typically sells for around $75 today, but we are starting it at a fair bit less, so you'll have an opportunity to take a chance and bid on it or see how it goes. I like to do this in part because even if you're not a purchaser of such things, it's an opportunity for you to see what the market is, and it's an opportunity for us to test the market together. So these are the 3 pieces. And I just think it's beautiful. I love this color, and I've always been partial to Paden City. Now, this next piece that I have to show you is a pair of jeans. The pair of jeans is not wildly old, but I understand they're out of production. They were done by a company called Headgear. But what's significant about them is that this is the Negro League Baseball edition. And what it has sewn into it, which I think is really cool, is a whole bunch of the logos from the old Negro League baseball teams, particularly the teams that played between the 1920s and the 1940s, and there's some pretty significant ones on here. The league did very well in the middle of the 20th century, so much so that the players, when integration came to baseball in 1947, a lot of the best went to the major leagues, including the first, who was Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson played for the Kansas City Monarchs. Kansas City is where the Negro League Hall of Fame is now. And there were a lot of other players who were very famous who played in the Negro Leagues. Hank Aaron, who, if you put an asterisk by Barry Bonds and the steroid record, Hank Aaron, without steroids, actually hit more home runs without the assistance of steroids and was the home run leader of all time. And he had played, I believe, for the Birmingham Black Barons. And a couple of other famous players did too. Satchel Paige, the great pitcher who came into the major leagues when integration happened. He was already 42 years old. He played another 17 seasons. He had already played for 20 years in the Negro Leagues. I believe he played for Birmingham as well. Willie Mays played in the Negro Leagues. Hank Aaron, who else? Roy Campanella, a whole lot of people who were very, very talented. There had not been a black player in the Major League Baseball since the 1880s. 1889, the Syracuse team had a fellow named Fleet who was very good, who played for them, and then Jim Crow came along and they were not allowed to play in the major leagues for many years. After Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, lots of the most talented players went to the major leagues, and as a result, these teams quickly folded. But it's really neat because since I wasn't around then and didn't have awareness of these teams, it's fun to see all the logos. The New York Cubans were a famous team. The Baltimore had the Black Sox. The Indianapolis Clowns were quite famous, and if I'm not mistaken, they had another first, which was the first woman pitcher, and she was a black woman, and she went 33-8 over 3 seasons. So the Negro Leagues were really, really progressive in a whole lot of ways beyond just the fact that they were making it possible for black people to play baseball on a professional level. In some cities, the black teams actually outdrew the white teams for periods of time. So I just thought this was really cool. It's a 38 by 33, I believe. It does say 38 on the inseam there. And they're in good shape. The fading is intentional. The only thing that's worn is where it said headgear, so somebody did wear these some, but they're in really good overall condition. I thought they were really cool, and they are out of production, so I thought it was a neat thing to show and something interesting to put in and see how it does online. They sell pretty well, so I expect that we'll have a nice result with those. Now these, oh boy, it'd almost be better. This is so silly. I don't wear jewelry, folks, and ear clips are a little funny feeling to me. The only reason I'm putting these on is because the way the camera's set up, I can't really show you everything with 2 hands because this is a full set. So I got to put those on my ears, and boy, I don't know how women do this, but this is a neat set from the 1960s, and these are Rivoli beads in the watermelon color. So there's a pair of earrings, there is a pin, and there is a bracelet. I'm going to take these off now that you've seen them. This little piece here, the pin, you can see how great the color is. This was very popular in the 1960s, and they are color changing depending on which way you see them in the light. So they're called watermelon stones because they go from the green to the pinky and the purple. And this one was originally made with some sort of a maker label on it, but the maker label has been sanded off. You can see the C for copyright, but there's no maker label on there. Now, the reason that that might have happened is because companies like Weiss, or Weiss, depending on how you like to pronounce that. I've heard it both ways, although Weiss is certainly the Germanic way. They made pieces for other companies as well. So my suspicion is that this was made originally to be sold under one label and then was given to another company to sell, and that's why it's a no name. None of these have a mark on them that is legible. But They're very nice. The bracelet has reasonable length. It's actually big enough around for my wrist, which means it's about 6 inches. And the colors are just really fun. People really enjoy these stones. The Rivoli is this shape where it almost appears to be upside down, but it's the way it's faceted. These are going to start at about $35 for the set of 3. Now in my teaser for this video, I showed this piece and said, guess where it's from? It has a bamboo handle. It has a definitely Japanese looking aspect to it. And yet, when we look past the luster and the cool looking design, which is a 1970s design, we find out on the bottom it is actually Norwegian. It is by a company called Porsgrunn. Porsgrunn is a factory making porcelain in the town of Porsgrunn in Norway, which is a big harbor, and at one time had the largest ship in Norway based there. And a fellow who had the shipping lines there decided he needed more industry, so he had more reasons to use his ships, and he established the porcelain factory in 1885. They hired a number of good designers, particularly in the later years, women. There was a woman named Nora Gulbrandsen, I believe, who did a lot of their Art Deco lines. And later, Anna Marie Odegaard came to work for them, and she is the designer of this piece. So she took Japanese influences mixed with a bit of an almost copper luster look, and used the bamboo handle to give it that flavor, but it is in fact actually made in Norway. I have not seen this particular pattern online anywhere being sold, so I don't think it's one that you are going to find very often in the marketplace. It just says that it is Amari, and I think that that's sort of a takeoff on Imari, which is a certain style of Japanese ceramics again. So it's very good quality. You notice that there's no dots or scrapes. The other thing I like about the design that I think is very intelligent is that it's got a nice wide lip, and if you look under the lid, it hooks into that lip, so it would be very difficult to knock the lid off and break it, which is great because it means it's still here with us today. I am not sure what to expect from this piece. I imagine it's worth $35 to $45, and we will find out together. Now this next piece is both sweet and sad, and I think very attractive. I'll stand so that you can see me and it, because I have to stand back with it. I'll come forward and show you the image in a bit. This is a frame that some people would call tramp art. They're also referred to as Adirondack frames because the Adirondack region in New York is where these stick-based frames originated and were made to sell to tourists. They were very popular in the late part of the 19th century, and that's when this is from because, first of all, you can see there's a wood backing. That's something they like to do in the Victorian era rather than cardboard like we usually use now, or helpfully acid-free board. And if you look there, this one is especially collectible and poignant because this one is a funereal piece. This photo is a photo of a wreath and our mother. And what a sweet picture of her. You can tell by the hairstyle and the clothes that this would be sometime around the 1880s or 90s. I don't know whether she passed on at a younger age or whether that was an earlier picture of her that her children chose. But it's a very sweet and somewhat solemn piece, and a lot of people like to collect these. A lot of people are interested in things related to funereal and similar types of subjects these days. And so this is something that there is a good collector market for. We are starting this at $49. I believe the value is somewhere in the $95 to $100 range, and we shall see again what happens with this, but these are very, very collectible. I have a friend who used to be in the antique business, and he then trained to become a mortician, and he collects all sorts of things related to funereal items. And a lot of people I know who are in the funeral business do. On a happier note, though, we have this very chic doll. And this very chic doll is a Miss Revlon doll. This was made in 1958. The mid-50s were the first time that little girls, they started to notice that little girls aspired to be grown-ups, and that didn't just mean that they wanted to be moms and have babies. It meant that they wanted to play with dolls that were grown-up figures and were doing interesting grown-up things. And so this gal is dressed in hose and heels. The arches are permanently made to wear high heels. That was something new in dolls. They'd always had flat feet before. She's got a lovely cloak. It's got its original rhinestones. The condition is really good on this piece. There's a few little smudges on the leg, but because she has her original hose, I did not want to try to clean them. You'd have to take the hose off to do that, and it should clean up well because it's vinyl. But she's got her original cloak. It's got the rose pattern inside. The Miss Revlon doll was dressed in several different manners, and Ideal Toy Company, that was known originally for teddy bears, they were the first to really make those in the United States on a wide level. They were the ones who got the contract to make the Miss Revlon doll. And the reason they picked Revlon is because they wanted something that was denoting high fashion, and again, something that seemed grown up. The only thing this one's missing is her original box. Everything else is there. She's got her hose, she's got her coat. The coat has all the rhinestones. All of that is very important. Her hair is in wonderful condition. They used something called sarin, and it rooted very well. And this doll was not played with hard. Somebody really loved her and took good care of her. So she's in great shape. The eyes closed. They're not cloudy. All of that is very important with dolls, that the eyes work properly. So she's really a sweetheart. In 1958, she was the most popular doll. A little company in Los Angeles saw the success of the Miss Revlon doll and said, wow, we should make a cheaper, smaller one overseas that we can sell that will be easier for little girls to handle. And the next year, Barbie was born. And Barbie became the fashion doll of choice. But Miss Revlon was the big hit in 1958. These typically sell in the $75 to $95 range, possibly more depending on what they're wearing. And wow, so far I've put on earrings and played with dolls. I'm sure my mother is very proud. Anyhow, you know, you just have to product demonstrate sometimes. Along the lines of play, this is a neat piece that was made by the Marx company. Marx, of course, was known for tin toys primarily. They did start getting into some plastic in the 50s. By the late 60s, they had to make everything in plastic. And in 1972, Louis Marx sold the company to Quaker Oats. There was this thing in the 70s where everybody was consolidating into big companies where companies that made one thing bought something completely different to diversify. The problem was they didn't know how to run those other things very well, and so Quaker Oats unfortunately ran Marx right into the ground, but Louis Marx became a 50 millionaire as a result. Around that time, they got a contract with Sears, and they started making these heritage play sets. I would love to show you what this looks like. I'll show you what it is. It is the White House. It has stand-up pieces that form the White House, and in front of it will be a bunch of little figures that show what at that time were the 36 presidents that had had office up until then. So the Heritage playset was one of several others, and now this one sells well, and the reason I can't show it to you better, it's got the Sears label on it even though it was made by Marx, but notice the staples. This has never been opened. And so I didn't want to take it out of the box to show you. There's other examples online where you'll be able to see better. But it is the White House with the presidential figures. They also made, as it shows here, the Battle of the Alamo, the blue and the gray. They also did Fort Apache. Those pieces actually sell for pretty big money. The presidential set was a little more serious and maybe a little more adult-oriented, not so much things that kids would play with typically, and so The values on these are not as high as some of those other sets, but I still expect it should sell for about $40 because it's never been opened. It might even go for a little more if we get someone who's a presidential history buff interested. Now I know everybody enjoys jewelry, it seems, and I have another piece here to show. This one, I'm going to get out of its way so you can see it better, is by Sandor. We may be able to see that mark on the back. We'll see if we can get it up. I think you may be able to see that right on that brass bar with all the hoops to which all of these little grapes are attached. The thing Sandor is best known for is they really kicked off the enameled jewelry in the mid-20th century, the enameled flower power pins and all that sort of stuff. But their designers liked anything that looked naturalistic, and Mr. Sandor himself, the originator of the company, was really big on the idea that things should look like they were good quality, that they should look more like real jewelry or real materials as opposed to glitzy glam but not looking realistic. And so that's why you see sort of a duller quality to this gold here. He didn't want shiny, brassy, obviously fake. He wanted something where it had a nice look to it. We know this one is 1950s or 60s because it has Aurora Borealis stones. I'm going to lift the leaf so you can see that better. See how they're like carnival glass with the iridescent. It always surprised me that we didn't see carnival glass or Aurora Borealis stones until the 1950s and 60s, but a lot of the rhinestones before the Second World War came from Austria, and carnival glass, they had iridized glass in Austria, but it never occurred to them to do that in jewelry. It really was more of an American invention, so the American companies were the ones that started demanding the Aurora Borealis crystals and using them to glisten up the jewelry in that period of time. It's a nice grape leaf. The big thing about this is it's big. Big is good with costume jewelry. Signed is good. Things that are shapes are good. So this actually has a lot going for it. I believe this is 3.5 inches from top to bottom. So this is going to show well. I mean, I should do it against fabric, but we'll just put it in front of my nose. See how big that is? It can cover my nose. It's big. So this is a good piece of jewelry, and I am interested to see how it will do. Sandor doesn't come on the market all that often. They were in business for 40 or 50 years. They were one of the ones that went out of business earlier than a lot of the others, so we don't see a ton of their work, and I believe that this could do rather well. I think we're starting at around $35, but we'll see what the market will hold. Now this next item I think is a lot of fun because I really enjoy jazz music and a lot of the big band standards, and this is Columbia Records from the 1940s. This set is from the Stork Club in New York, and the Stork Club was quite famous. They had all sorts of the big bands come through. It originated in 1929, and the owner was raided in 1931 and then kidnapped by a mobster and went through all sorts of hell to get it off the ground. But by 1934, when Prohibition was lifted, he was opened again just south of Central Park in New York City. And it became the place to go for important bands, for big celebrities. A lot of really notable things happened there. Prince Rainier and Princess Grace Kelly, the American actress, announced their engagement while they were at the Stork Club. Walter Winchell used to broadcast his radio show frequently from table number 50 at the Stork Club, and a lot of good music played at the Stork Club. And so, because it was such a prestigious place and considered so important, it was an obvious thing for them to release a record of music that was played at the Stork Club. In the old days, of course, and here we are, a night at the Stork Club. In the old days, of course, we have a few records in a set, and these are 78s. And so each one just has one song on each side. But the songs they have are really great old songs. And if you have an old Victrola or a record player that can play 78s, which a lot of people do now because vinyl's coming back, these are very clean. They have not been played a whole lot. And we have My Blue Heaven. And this is all by Sonny Kendis and the Stork Club Orchestra, who were the house band. We have A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody. We have My Buddy, which a friend of mine has on her phone ringer every time another friend of ours calls, and Stardust, amongst others. And then there's B-sides to all of these. Now, the albums are in great shape. The album cover has a mark on the back and some wear at the corners, which is too bad because the graphics are great, but it's clean and acceptable enough. And what makes this collectible is the fact that it came from the Stork Club, as well as the fact that the records are very playable and it is in good enough condition to be a strong graphic that somebody would have in their bar, in their man cave, that sort of thing. So there's a couple of different collectors. Even people who don't have record players would be interested in this because there are people who strictly collect items that came from the Stork Club. In fact, I have a few pieces, an ashtray and a swizzle stick from the Stork Club in my barware collection. So I thought this was great. I believe I'm starting it at a whopping $9.99. The value of these seems to be around $30 to $35. So maybe someone will get a bargain. Now from New York City, we are going to go to the opposite corner of the United States, the northwest corner of Washington State, where this basket would have been made actually about the same time as the Stork Club records. This is a Macaw Nation basket. There's also ones by the Nootka and the Nunalith that are very similar. They all did a similar type of weaving with the cedar bark. This is a large size market basket and the colors are very strong. This didn't get used a whole lot. It's got the whaling boats. The Macaw actually have resumed whaling again, which has been quite controversial, but that is definitely a motif, that and the birds, the seabirds together. So you've got the two strongest motifs that Macaw baskets typically have. There's not a lot of unraveling or fraying because it wasn't used a whole lot, which is good, but this one was used. It was made to be used, and you can tell it was if you look closely. And when you look at these baskets with the cedar planking, you do want to make sure that there's no breaks. This one does not have any breaks there. There's a little bit of wear at the corners, which is a place that happens. You can see just a wee bit of wear there and around on the bottom. It's very important that the colors be as strong as they can be because this is when they were still using vegetable dye, so the fading that happens is natural, but the stronger the color the better because it means it's the closest to the original condition. Now these large market baskets were something where the Native Americans, they didn't do this form until the white men came and they saw that there was a customer for this sort of thing, and they also saw that it was a pretty sensible thing to use, and so they started making these with the handle. So it's a collision of two cultures in that regard. The only other condition thing, which I should point out, is that originally this would have been more of a perfect oval shape. There's a couple of breaks in the weaving here. They'd weave around another piece, and that piece has broken a little bit here, so it's a bit out of shape there. And I believe I noticed one other spot that was similar, yes, on the end here, where there's just a wee bit of a break. So it's not in perfect condition, but it's in really good condition for what it is. This came from an estate in Quilcene, Washington. Some folks up there were collectors, and they sold their house, and it came to me, and it's now going to go to someone else. These used to sell for as much as $185 to $200 in this size. The Macaw baskets are still probably the most popular of the Northwest baskets. The values have come down some since then, so my sense of this is that it will probably sell in the $100 range. We will see if there's someone out there who loves it as much as I do. I think it's a really neat piece. Books are something that I really enjoy. My mother raised me to be a bit of a bibliophile. I have a small collection, and I've got a couple books next to show you. The first one is very small, so let's start with that because the second one's really big, and that's going to be a little more cumbersome. The first one, and this is my kind of reading, is a Peanuts book. These little hardback Peanuts books were sold at Hallmark in particular, in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, and they did a whole series of them. They were done as presentation pieces. They're the most valuable if someone didn't write the name of the person they were giving them to in them. But this one is not in bad condition. There's just a little scuffing around the edges. It does say Hallmark on the back. What is interesting to me about this one, though, is it always rains on our generation. Peanuts was at its peak of popularity in the 1960s, in part because Charles Schulz developed all these characters in the 1950s and 60s, and he said when he was interviewed, he did it largely based on his own personality. So the personality traits of the Peanuts characters all represent, for the most part, some aspect of him that he wanted to portray through these characters. He was not happy with them being called Peanuts, by the way. They were originally called Little Folks, and he was published in the St. Paul paper, which is where he lived in Minnesota. And when it got picked up for syndication, it turned out that Little Folks was copyrighted by some previous cartoon. And the publisher said, oh, Howdy Doody's really popular, and they have the Peanut Gallery, so we're going to call it Peanuts. Charles Schulz never liked the name Peanuts because he said there isn't a peanut character. He went to a newsstand and said, do you have peanuts? And they said no, and we don't sell popcorn either. And that was exactly what he was afraid of. But apparently he didn't need to be, because they became very well established in spite of it. Now, there are a lot of these books. Some of them are fairly common. Some of them are harder to find. This is one of the harder to find ones because it always rains on our generation. So this is late 60s during times of protests. It's Lucy and her philosophy. He had a lot of fun with Lucy. He designed Lucy to be the mean character because he wanted to take a character that would usually be weak in a cartoon and make them the strong one. And back when Lucy was introduced in 1952, little girls were sugar and spice and everything nice. So he said, we're going to do just the opposite of that. She's going to be the mean one. She's going to be the sarcastic one. And that's why she ended up being the social critic a lot of times as well. And so this one is harder to find. And you can see right there, a disarming smile is nothing against my frown, and she was right about that. The condition on this is good overall. She talks about facial expressions. She talks about knowing oneself, where she's being made to write, I will not talk in class. And then on the next page she says, on the other hand, what else would I do? So I gotta say, I like her spunk, and I think this is fun. Some of these little books can sell for, again, most sell for $8 or $10. Some of them can sell for $30 or $35. I believe this may be one of those, and we will find out. Okay, now here's the other book. This is the Tales of Genji scroll. And this is a presentation box. It's got its original mailing box. Now the presentation box, it's a good thing it's there because it got a little bit of moisture and some stains from being misstored, but that doesn't really matter because the presentation box kept the main book in perfect condition, which is what we want. And here we have the book itself. It does have a little tiny water stain on the back, which will affect the value some, but fortunately it doesn't show. These were done about 1970. An edition of about 1250 were made. I believe this is marked on the box as number 324 of 1250. So it was a short edition, but it's a very famous and very important book. It was written in Japan, and it was the first novel in history. It came out around the year 1100, and it is a fictionalized account, loosely fictionalized, that was written by a lady in waiting in the court of Japan. And she was writing about a prince and one of his concubines, and it's about love and lust and loyalty and friendship and all sorts of things. And the original transcript was lost many years ago. It does not exist anymore, but the tale remained. And so around this time, they decided to print it as a scroll. I'm going to see if I can show you some of how that works. So Most of the pages are the book in scroll form, printed and laid out as you would have read it originally. The other pages, which I'll find one here in a moment, let's see here, it might just take a bit, there we go. There are wonderful illustrations that are basically like woodblock print. And there's several of these in the book too. It's quite heavy, so I'm going to stand back here with it. But it was a very significant book. It was well received in the courts of Japan. It was absolutely trend-setting and the world's first novel, and is it big and heavy. I usually see these sell for around $100. I'll be curious, since this one's just a little bit imperfect, what that might do to affect the value, but the fact that the interior is so intact and it's got so many block prints as well as the regular text makes me think it won't affect the value much. So while I'm thinking of it, please comment in the space below here and also hit the thumbs up button to like this video. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button below. Also hit the bell below to be notified of new videos coming every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much for following along. Let's go back to this video. The next item I bought when I went to see the pop-up sale at Real Nifty Vintage up in Illinois. This was one of the things I bought because I thought it was really special and interesting. It is a mug from about 1910, and the motifs on it are all good luck symbols. Now you have to remember, in 1910, the swastika, which actually comes from India and is known in the Sanskrit and probably even predates that from what people are discovering. The swastika was a sign of good luck. It still is in Hinduism and Buddhism. It's just in the West, unfortunately, it became equated with Nazism for obvious reasons, but that is one of the many good luck symbols. The person who painted this, and we can see who it is because they signed it on the bottom, they bought a blank from Austria and then they hand painted all of this themselves and fired it. That's why you see some gold deposit on the bottom. This was not a factory made piece. This is something that somebody who was a talented amateur painter did, or a local porcelain painter. In addition to the good luck swastika, they also have the four-leaf clover. You will see a wishbone. You'll see a rabbit's foot. So they were leaving nothing to chance. And I just thought that this was so interesting and really quite attractive. And there are people who have a different understanding of this symbol who do buy and collect these items that were made with the swastika before it became a symbol of hatred. So that is who the customer is for this. This was done on a Royal Austria blank, again, right about 1910. And I just thought it was really interesting, and so I bought it from him and decided to put it out for everyone to see, and hopefully somebody will appreciate it for what its intent was, and it will bring them good luck too. I believe that I'm starting this somewhere in the $30 range, and we will see what happens from there. Okay, I'm going to put one more piece of jewelry on, but this time it's something that fits on the wrist. This is sterling and vermeil, and what vermeil, which is spelled Vermeil like Dick Vermeil, the football coach, V-E-R-M-E-I-L, is a gold wash that's done on top of sterling so that you get that gold color, but it's just a very thin gold layer of plate. So it's not really gold that you would take off and expect to have a bunch of gold and be valuable for that. The value is in the design and the fact that it's sterling, and it is made in Taxco, Mexico. Taxco, there's a mark here. Hopefully we'll be able to get that to come in. There we are. Taxco is the area that used to have all the silver mines in Mexico. And they don't have a lot of mining anymore, but the place really grew very fast between the 1950s and now, in part because of a man named William Spratling, who was an American. He taught architecture at Auburn University in Alabama, and in 1931, inspired by the way that Mexico was trying to modernize after the revolution of the early 1900s was over, he went down and realized they're making all of this silver, mining all of it. They're not making anything with it. We need to introduce silversmithing. Spratling designs are very costly and valuable and desirable now. He also did work in Alaska later on, which is something I didn't know until recently. So anything that you see that says William Spratling or his initials is very, very good. Other companies, Margot de Taxco is very popular, but Mexican sterling in general has come to be really respected because of him. And if you go to Taxco today, the entire downtown is a giant silver market with people selling jewelry and tableware and other things made out of silver, even though they don't really mine it much there anymore. So the silver industry still exists. I thought this was very pretty. It fits my wrist, and I have smaller wrists. I think it's about 5 to 5.5 inches. It will be starting out, I believe, in the $35 to $40 range. While we are on the subject of glitz and glamour, I'm going to show you something that is not wildly old, but my understanding is that it's discontinued, and for an interesting reason, so I thought it would be a good thing to show you. I will be the first to admit that purses are an area where you have to be really careful of fakes. There are a lot of fakes of designer purses. I know I got some from an estate recently and I didn't look at them closely, and I showed them in a video and someone immediately said, oh, that Dooney and Burke purse is not real, it's the wrong color, the stitching's wrong. And those are things you really need to know about purses. But this purse, I feel pretty confident in the attribution because it's not all that old, but it is a Bruce Makowski. And you think, well, Bruce Makowski, that's kind of a funny name. If you're not into purses, you wouldn't necessarily know who that is, but there's the signature. Bruce Makowski and his wife Kathy Van Zeeland, and purses with her name I know are still made. I don't believe his are anymore for a reason I'll tell you shortly. But they were really big in the 90s. Actually, they started in 78, but in the 80s and especially in the 90s and early 2000s, they were really big on QVC. They sold a lot of this sort of thing. And they developed a good label, and it was popular. The style's nice, it's glamorous, it's glitzy. You can see this one is very clean inside. It's a little hard to tell with the light, but it's got all its zippers. No one poured makeup in it. It's all in great shape. It's got that neat leopard inside. Very glam. The handle's in good shape. My understanding is that Bruce Makowski handbags are not made with his name on them anymore, in part because he and his wife sold out in 2008, and he became a real estate magnate in Los Angeles, but he was still selling on QVC. Well, he started something with another partner and pledged to do a bunch of lines on QVC, and then somehow the deal didn't go through. He ended up being sued and got tagged for a $2.3 million judgment, and so he decided to really focus mainly on real estate. He actually holds the record for the most expensive property listing. He had a property, I think he sold it for $94 million. It was listed at $250 million, and I understand that because of that, he was able to pay his debt and move on, and has been very successful. It's got a nice pocket in the back. Makowski purses seem to sell in about the $65 to $125 range, depending on style. This one, I did not see a comparable, so we'll see what this particular one can fetch. I am generally a big stickler on things being more than 30 years old in terms of what I sell in a vintage context. I do make exceptions sometimes if a piece has interest because of a story like the one I just told, and particularly if the item is discontinued and out of production. And I have to say that gold's pretty snazzy too. Speaking of snazzy, I am going to turn off the lights and show you something in just a moment. Where did he go? Well, I have myself a black light. And the reason I have a black light is I want to show you this wonderful Heisey winged scroll custard glass. This was called Ivorina Verde when they made it, because it had a green tinge, and to get the green tinge in the custard glass they used uranium, so it glows like crazy under a black light. Now I'm going to turn it on so it'll focus better and you can see the pattern. And here it is. This is the winged scroll. You can see the design. You saw how it glowed under a black light. It is custard glass. Heisey started producing in 1897, and Ivorina Verde, as they called the custard glass, was immediately a huge success. So this is going to date sometime around the first 10 years of their production. And it is just neat. It's got a nice design, it's big and substantial, and it is a berry set. It has this bowl and 5 of the little berry bowls to go beside it. So it's a set of 6. Now I'll come a little forward so you can see the gold is in good shape. It has some wear, which is actually good, because there have been reproductions of some old patterns of custard glass, particularly Argonaut is a pattern that's been reproduced. So you do want to make sure that what you're getting is really old. But winged scroll is a very pretty pattern. And like I say, there are 5 berry bowls to go with it. So it's a neat set. And Heisey was a really good maker. Again, they made heavier glass. They made pattern glass early on, like these patterns. Then they switched to elegant glass of the Depression era, and they made that until they went out of business in 1957. But the custard glass was something that they really didn't do much after about the 1910s, when custard glass fell out of favor. So this is a nice early set. It doesn't appear to have any chips or cracks or breaks or any problems, and that set should sell somewhere between $100 and $125. We will list it now and see where it goes. And speaking of where it goes, well, this looks like it could go just about anywhere it wants, because she can fly. Well, at least she could fly if she was mounted where she was originally, which was on the hood of a 1950 era Nash. Nash cars were very popular in 1950. It was probably their most successful year ever. They looked like giant inverted bathtubs, but they were very aerodynamic. And they decided that they needed something to spice them up. And so they got George Petty, who had succeeded Varga as the illustrator for Esquire magazine, to do this design. There's his signature. And it is a winged woman in flight. And isn't she great? She's also got the original mounting hardware. Now, it does have a crack, but it is something that could be polished and would be able to be restored, or she could be just like this for a collection or a rat rod. I've done nothing to try to clean her. The way to clean, by the way, when you see this sort of speckling, people will wad up a bit of aluminum foil, or they'll take the very finest steel wool and very lightly moisten it, and very carefully, especially on a corner where it can't be seen, polish it just a little bit. A lot of these little blisters will come out, and it will clean up fairly well. But I've decided to leave that for the person who buys it, especially because nowadays there's a lot of hood ornament collectors and they'd rather have it the way it came. And there's a lot of people who are not fully restoring cars. They're doing what they call rat rods, where they kind of fix it up enough to run around with it and have it as a driver and have fun. So she might end up on a car again, you never know. But I think she's just beautiful. George Petty was a person who did not do well in school, was not really going anywhere, and they noticed that he really liked to draw, and they said, well, maybe you ought to go to the Chicago Arts Academy. He enrolled in a night class, and within a few days he was teaching the night class. He just had a gift. And female forms were definitely one of his favorites. He was inspired very much by Maxfield Parrish, and so there's this ethereal quality. And he also invented the centerfold for Esquire magazine, where he would draw a risque but not nude form, and then you would open it up and there would she be in all of her splendor. And that was the first time anyone had thought to make one that folded out so that you could actually have a larger image. He also did a bunch of calendars with women on them for the Rigid Tool Company, and I will not make the obvious joke. I think that he was a great illustrator, though. His pinups are very collectible. We're not sure if you're going to still be able to sell them on eBay with their new rules, but we'll find out, I guess. But this you can, and even in this condition, she should sell for around $100 to $120 if the right people see her, so we'll find out if that happens. Now this bear, to the untrained eye, which I have to say mine would have been, except I had seen these before and knew what they were, this looks like a brand new piece. It's not. It's got the original tag, and it is part of the Patriot Bear series, where they took people in various occupations. I believe there's a military version of this as well. And it says, Patriot Bear, the service-oriented Patriot Bears are dedicated with pride and affection to the people who serve the United States of America. And then on the back it says, made in Korea. This is from about 1985. And this is when we start seeing production in Korea really improve, and factory production starts to be sent into the United States. Simultaneously, there was a big Buy America push going on, so this was a little bit controversial at its time, but he's awfully cute, and he's got all his stuff. He's got his little mail bag with the logo. He's never had any play, so he's got his original tag. The shoes are there. The cap is there. So he's got everything he should. He was imported by the J.J. Wind Company from New York. And back then, I think these cost quite a bit because teddy bear collecting became really popular in the late 80s and early 90s. And a whole lot of bears were made by all sorts of companies around the world. Gund in Germany, this company in Korea. The Steiff was still making bears in Germany and really selling a ton at that time. And there were Boyd's bears came out around then, so there were a lot of collector bears. Now, most collector bears are not worth so much in the market anymore, but just like a lot of the collector dolls made in that time, there are exceptions. And this guy doesn't do too badly. I think he's worth around $40. And he will be going by US mail to somewhere else. So how's that for appropriate? Well, usually I only do 20 items, and I have numbers 19 and 20 in my hand now. I'm actually doing 21 this time. The reason being that the items I have here are variations on the same theme. These are Silverton Script. And Silverton Script is a rather interesting thing from the Depression. Now, if I did not have them in these plastic sleeves, I got them in the plastic sleeves. I blame the plastic sleeves for the fact that they're rippling a little, but they've never been used. And it's very important not to touch them and get oil in them because that circulates them and that devalues them. This one is good for 50 cents. This one is good for $1. These were issued in Silverton, Oregon. Silverton is a little town with great history. It's been there since the 1850s, before statehood, actually. It was a place a lot of people who came across the Oregon Trail moved because it was right where the Willamette Valley starts to rise, and so there was farming, but there was a lot of timber, and you were close to mountains that they hoped would have lots of mining and resources. They don't. But in the Depression, Silverton, like a lot of places, fell on hard times, and it was very difficult to get cash. And so the American Legion, the Delbert Reeves Post, gathered a bunch of money and basically created their own bank. And it says, issued by the Delbert Reeves Post No. 7, American Legion of Silverton, Oregon, and secured 100% by Marion County school warrants. So the school basically took bonds, and then the American Legion would print these. The ones with the red numbers are what you want. 50 cent is a good denomination, and $1 was a lot, especially in the Depression. There's the information on it for you. It says it is redeemable on or before December 31st, 1934. So these were going to be good for about 2 years while hopefully things worked out. And that was about the time FDR was elected, and the economy had a little bit of a rebound, and the currency started to flow more, and they didn't need script. There are little towns in this country that still issue script for use in local businesses. There's one in the Lakes region of New York that does it, and it's a way to keep money in the local economy. And it was a very clever idea. It helped the town survive the Depression. This dollar bill is probably worth $75 to $100 bills now. So it is very collectible, and we will expect that it might go to Oregon, but it also could just go to someone who collects old paper money. So that brings us to our last item, and while we're on the subject of money, I figured, well, why not finish with money? And we have something that I am going to have fun showing you because I've been a coin collector for a very long time. Now this is a set of coins. The first thing I want to tell you about sets of coins like this, it has a barcode on the back. It may have been sold on QVC. It may have been sold in some other manner. When you buy coins, if you buy them in these sets, you are automatically paying a 20 to 30% markup for it having a presentation box, especially if it's fancy. I went to a guy's house and he had one that had 100 pennies, and they were all very recent vintage, which meant that the value of the coins was $1. And I said, oh, what did you pay for this? Oh, I think our receipt says Dad paid $45 for it. That is why I don't recommend buying these unless you're buying them on the secondary market. Let someone else make that mistake and take that hit, because the coins in them are great, but they're also coins you could get for the value that we will sell this for at the coin store. Now, granted, they are fun to have, and what's nice about these is these are typesets and they've done all the work for you. So it's not that they don't deserve something for their effort, and they are neat to look at, but it folds down and it has these cases, and the cases come out. And when they say typeset, what they mean is they're trying to show one of each example of coins from a certain period of time. Now, another problem with this is that, again, they're not going to buy the expensive ones. So there isn't going to be a 20-cent piece in here because those are expensive, or a trade dollar, or an eagle cent. So they do skip some things, and so this is not going to be an example that shows everything that the U.S. Mint made, but there are some interesting ones in here. The condition of the older ones tends to be in the very good to fine range, and the newer ones are practically mint because they're newer. But up here we have a large cent. When they talked about Abraham Lincoln walking 6 miles to give 6 cents back to someone, well, that's the 6 cents. They were that big because the idea was that the copper was worth a penny, and so it was supposed to be big. Well, then around the time of the Civil War, they decided to slim them down to the size we're used to now. They came out with the eagle cent, which we don't see here, but then we have the Indian penny made in one type of material. Then they switched to copper. They used to be bronze, actually, a bronze alloy. And then this is the Lincoln penny. This one is the 1909 VDB. What that means is there's tiny initials for Victor D. Brenner, the designer, on the back. He put them there. The Mint did not approve. They took them off. The 1909 SVDB is the most expensive Lincoln penny there is because they made less than 500,000 of them with his initials. And then this one is the one that everyone hated during the war that everyone likes to have now. It's a steel or zinc penny, and people hated them at the time because they were always confusing them for dimes. They were trying to save copper during the war, and so they quickly got rid of that idea. I will show you some of the other ones fairly quickly here. There's the Liberty V nickel. They also have one that's kind of gold colored that they refer to as the Racketeer's nickel, and I think that's because they were trying to pass them off as gold pieces, because they were still making gold coins back then. That's the early 1900s. Then the Buffalo nickel with the Indian head on the one side and the buffalo on the back. There's a couple of Jefferson nickels here, which we're pretty familiar with. One of them, though, I'll show you because this is a nice clue. See that it has the mint mark on the back in a big letter over the Capitol Dome. That means that it's 35% silver because, again, we're trying to save nickel. It's the Second World War. Silver is actually not as important to the war effort as nickel, so we're taking some of the nickel away. They're actually worth more now because they have silver in them. This set are dimes, and we have the Barber dime, which was a design you saw up until the 1900s. Female depictions of liberty were the only things put on coins. They did not have likenesses of presidents or any authority figures at all. That was not done until later. Then we get into the Mercury head, which is a beautiful design. We've got, this one is the oldest, that's the seated Liberty. She's holding a pole with a cap on the end. That's that stick that she's got. And then the FDR dimes that we're used to, there's a silver one and a non-silver one. Silver lasted until 1964 on most American coins, and after that they took it out, except for something I'll show you in a minute. These are quarters. Again, we have the barber style. We have the Standing Liberty here, which is a beautiful design, but the dates were raised over the surface, so they wore out easily, so they didn't leave those in production too very long. They're a little harder to find. And then the Washington quarter came out in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of his birth. And then we also have, speaking of the bicentennial, this one with the bicentennial reverse. Now we see a lot of coins with the bicentennial reverse because lots of people hung on to them, so they're not really worth a whole lot. These are half dollars, and these show all the different kinds, starting with, again, the barber. This one has a little O underneath the tail feathers. That's for the New Orleans Mint, which closed in 1908. So if you see an O, it's going to be before that time. The other pieces are the Standing Liberty, which is a very pretty design. Then the Benjamin Franklin that has the Liberty Bell on the back. And then for the first time in history, right after, it used to be that when they did start putting people's visages on coins that you had to wait 25 years. Well, when JFK was assassinated, there was such an outpouring that the next year they replaced the Franklin with the JFK head, which is still the half dollar we have today. This one has silver in it. From 1965 to 1969, they were partial silver, and after that they didn't have any. And then the last group, which is a lot of people's favorite, which are silver dollars. Some of them were not people's favorite. The Susan B. Anthony was not a success because it was too similar in size to the half dollar and people found it confusing and didn't like it. The larger silver dollars that are shown here, this one is the Morgan dollar, which is a classic that people seem to really love with the eagle on the back. This one is the peace dollar, which I always found very attractive. This was supposed to designate peace after the First World War, and that has the standing eagle. Then they didn't make silver dollars for a really long time. From 1935 until 1970, there were no dollar coins made at all in the US. And then 1971, they came out with the Eisenhower dollar. He had just died in 1969, so they decided to commemorate him. And it had the eagle landing on the moon because this is right after the Apollo moon landing. And then the bicentennial version, and you see how shiny like a mirror that is? That's called proof. That's where the mint shines it up and no one has ever touched it and it was never meant to be released and held in human hands. And that's got the Liberty Bell, like the Franklin half, with the moon on it. That set all together in the box, I imagine somebody probably paid a couple $100s for this because they were paying for the presentation. The truth is the coins therein are worth around $165 today, and we are going to start this at a little bit lower price because honestly with coins, the coin collectors know what it is, it gets them excited, they all bid, and it always goes up to the price it should because coins are the most collected thing in the entire world. So that is our final item for this, and I want to thank you so much for joining me. I always enjoy doing this, and please, if you are seeing this as a level 2 member, feel free to go and take a look, follow the listings. There are buy it nows on, I believe in this case, every piece, so if you like it, you can just buy it right away. If you want to watch it, you can watch it, and for people seeing this video after it drops, well, if the listings are still live, you can go take a look too. Or if you see this a lot later, you can look at the completed listings and you'll get an idea of what the market holds. So thanks so much again to my Level 2 members for making this bonus video possible. We have one every month. I look forward to saving more things for you next month. In the meantime, we'll see you soon. My regular broadcasts are Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 o'clock Eastern. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community, here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.